over. A little update. Sorry about last week, but my family, of course, was all sick all at once, which made it a very low-key weekend, but certainly not very enjoyable by any means. So, of course, very glad to be back again at a full health. So very looking forward to, again, diving into this week's Talk It Over for the message. Before that, we have Michaela and Carolyn with me today, so welcome. Glad you guys could join me for this. Continuing in that series of planning ahead, it's been, thinking ahead, not planning ahead, but thinking ahead. It's been good. It's been a good series. It does definitely bring up some previous almost thoughts about the pre-decide he did a few years ago. So it does share some. So if you haven't had a chance, maybe check that out. The pre-decide was an excellent series as well. Ties very well with this one. But before we dive too far into today's message and talk it over, how are your weeks been? How have things been going? Anything new, exciting? Or maybe it's just been very moderately just smooth.
Yeah, for me, a couple of opportunities came up at work. Just to lead a team huddle that we have coming up, and then also present a little bit about a committee I'm a part of. Okay. With our team, and so a few leadership opportunities, which is great, but it also makes me a little nervous because they're new, at least in the workspace, and I just want to bring my best. And so the message today was very fitting for that, of just trusting God. And especially when I feel unequipped, it's really hard to step into those situations and not get nervous. And I think it's normal totally to get nervous, but just not get consumed by it. So it's been a great week of open doors, but just also wrestling with those mixed emotions.
Yeah, that's exciting.
Yeah,
that's exciting.
It is. How about you guys?
Well, for me, it's been, time to renovate after 20 years. So there's been painting happening, figuring out colors, which is not my forte. Lots happening with the business, bringing on a volunteer, brought on a new staff member. So lots of learning curves when you talk about that, Michaela, that feeling stretched. And it's like, okay, I don't know what I'm doing. I've never done this before. And just thinking through, I like how Craig sings that pre-decide of okay, what are the values I want to bring to it? And thinking through that. And then I got to hang out with your wife and son on Monday and do a trip to Toronto and be a part of some appointments, which I was really appreciative of. So it was a nice time to hang out and just get back to my hometown, which your wife and son do not want to live in.
No, definitely not. Oh, I understand the color. I see white and they're like, oh, look at all these different whites. I'm like, it's white. I'm not good with the colors either by any means. I leave that up to my wife. She decides colors and then just asks for input, whether she actually wants my input or she's already pre-decided this is the color, and including me in making me feel included in making the decision for both of us to paint stuff. She's never led me wrong with paint and colors and that. But certainly I'm the way. I don't know. It's a color. It's whatever for me. But the appointments on Monday for us was big. It was a great stepping stone for us, just in understanding more about our son and what's going on with him. We've been struggling with, is it a behavioral issue that we're dealing with, or is there a medical issue? And we finally got to the bottom of it's a medical issue. It's not a behavioral thing. So for us, that's
so helpful.
Helpful.
Yeah.
It's comforting to know, okay, that this is a medical thing. It's not just him. But at the same time, that also leads into the next phase, which means more doctors, there's more specialists, there's more things coming on board again to help us to try to work through the medical side of what's going on. But also the relief of now when people ask, the school's asking, whoever asks us, we can now have documented information saying, no, this is a medical issue, to not be excessively hard on him thinking it's a behavioral problem. So that's been really good. That's been helpful. It does ease us a little bit in knowing that, but at the same time, that means more doctor stuff again. But with that...
More ologies, as Leanne says.
More ologies, yeah. So, but it's going to help us to maybe revisit some things from, almost 9 years ago. And revisit some of that that's maybe could be part of the underlying issue now from 9 years ago. So it's going to be an interesting next year of a bit more testing, a bit more follow-ups, a bit more doctor appointments, a bit more of those things again. But that tends to be our season of we go through lows and ups. And last year was very low on the appointments. This year, it seems like we're going to start ramping back up to a bit more of the appointments again. But we, of course, understand that kind of the speed and pace. So it's nothing new to us. It's just planning those kind of things out. So
I'm just excited you're still not being admitted.
Yeah, we've been very
flus and colds.
It was very close last week. It was very, very close with how sick he got. But again, with the doctors we've known for almost 9 years now, talking to them and having that open conversation, they formulated a plan for us to be able to stay home if this worked. It did work, and so we were able to, which was super helpful. So it's been good to have non-hospitalizations. That's always excellent, but we do understand those do pop up and it does happen. But anyway, thinking ahead. Message today is trusting God when you don't understand. And I know we've all been there. We've all been there. You can't say you haven't been there. We've all been there. It's a normal thing that it's sometimes hard to trust Him when you just don't understand what's going on, what's the plan, what's the direction, why is this happening? It can be very difficult. So our verse today comes from Proverbs 3, verses 5 and 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways, submit to Him, and He will make your paths straight. A great one, because it's all about trusting Him with everything, not just bits, not just pieces, not relying on yourself to manage your way through, but really relying on Him in all areas and aspects of your life, which does sound like a lot at times to trust with everything.
At the same time though, Ian, really, I was thinking about that. How overwhelming does it feel like I need to figure this out? Right? Like at one point I'm like, yeah, Lord, like, you know, I'm like Emmett, I have an aging parent. And so since January, I've just had appointment after appointment after appointment after appointment. And we're going to have some more appointments. We found out some new information. And so when I was sitting there thinking, Lord, really? And then like, okay, no, you've got this. And I just have to do the next step. And I'm supposed to go through this journey and you have it figured out. And that's when it hit me today when Craig was talking about like, how frustrating is it when people think they have to figure it all out or they can prevent it?
Yep. Exactly.
You
can't. Exactly. So with that kind of that thought in mind, what's one thing that's easier said than done? And I know that's a fairly common thing that a lot of people say, oh, that's easier said than done. Is there an area or something that is maybe for you easier said than done?
For me, it's staying organized.
Okay.
I am a piler, and there's comfort in my piles, and I know where I pile.
Yep, I hear you.
Do you hear me?
I hear you.
Piler?
I hear you.
Michaela's probably.
I'm sorry. I can't.
This is your disaster. This is like our organization.
It's easier said than done when my husband will say, you know, can't you just be organized? I'm like, you know what? It's easier said than done. My brain just does not work that way. And it's so frustrating for him, who is an organized person. Mm-hmm. We tend to marry Felixes, right? As Oscars tend to marry the opposite. But yeah, and how frustrating it is, because I do believe it's true that when there's things piling up and it doesn't feel organized, it's overwhelming.
Yep.
Right. Yep. And so having piles is overwhelming. And so I just need to be better at what is my organization and how do I do it at work and also at home.
Yeah, we have the very similar problem, but I came up with a system that doesn't work too badly because I'm a piler and she's not. We have one area this is the
pile zone.
You pile here. So when I come home after paying bills or whatever, I don't file them. I just pile them. So they pile in here. And then Leanne knows that this pile is to be filed. So then now she can take that and organize it in the files. So her I'm organizing you a spot to put it as long as you put it there. Right. So it works in some ways for both of us because I don't have to organize each individual piece in its own little spot and it's got to go here. And then she takes it from there. I just set it in a pile that works for me. And then she's like, perfect. I know all this is to go. So
Yeah.
That does help in that, and I understand it is easier said than done because I have no urge to do that either. I'm just not organizing that kind of stuff.
Well, and we have multiple piles, right? So we have our business piles, we have our personal piles, we have our younger son's pile, we have my mom's pile, and my mom's a piler. And I think my husband is thinking, oh no, this is my future.
My future of piles. Oh man.
Organized mess,
Yeah,
but if you ask me what's in the pile, though, I can tell you what is in that pile. I know what everything is in there.
I respect that.
I know where it is. I know what's in it. I know. I do. I know what's in it. It's organized in my mind.
Until someone moves the pile.
Yeah, that's annoying. Yeah, that's annoying. Yep, that's definitely easier said than done. Oh man.
That's a tricky one. I feel like there's a lot of things I'll say easier said than done. I don't know. The one thing that comes to mind is emotions and like being able to act and do something despite how I feel because it's the right thing to do. And so I'll be told that, and then my feelings are kind of counteracting that and like saying, no, actually you feel this way, so therefore you should go with what you feel instead of what you should actually do. And it's just this like wrestling. And as a feeler, I don't know, you a feeler?
I don't know. I don't know exactly where I fit in on that scale.
Like, I'm sure you feel things.
Yeah. I'm not dead inside by any means, but I can't say that feeling is maybe my main way. I'd say I'm more of a very tactful thinker on things, like very thought process oriented over feel oriented.
Okay, so thinker over feeler.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, as like a fellow feeler, a lot of like what we do can be driven by what we feel. And so just like being challenged to still do things anyways. So morning routine, for example, been like, I guess 2 months now since I've been intentional about like going to sleep at a good time, waking up on time, and like being consistent with that routine.
Yep.
And then like having like intentional time with God in the morning, doing like a workout, even though I wake up and I don't feel like getting out of bed. Especially now that it's winter time. Well, thankfully spring is around the corner. Thank God. But just thinking, I wake up, it's really dark, I'm exhausted and cozy. I don't feel like getting up.
Yeah.
But realistically, once I actually get up, despite that feeling, do my morning routine, I feel better. So it's interesting how that initial feeling can lie to you. And if you stick with it, it could leave you feeling worse. Versus if you push through that initial feeling, you may still end up feeling good. You probably will actually feel better later on. So,
which you're pre-deciding, right?
You're pre-deciding. Yeah. So it's like, okay, I'm going to wake up at this time. Let's be intentional, going to bed early and setting things up for the next day. So
I when you're talking about the feelings in this, and I don't feel and my feelings pull me that way, I'm just thinking, just forget the feelings. That's not right. Just go this way. Right.
Yeah.
And that's how I would, as the thinking type, that's how I see it. I'm like, I've already thought through the steps of where this is going to go. Forget that. Forget your feelings. Put it aside. Just move this direction. Yeah. So I guess that tends to come off abrasive sometimes, especially to very feely people. It sometimes can be very abrasive because I'm not taking into account the feelings, right? I'm just logically thinking, forget that. That makes no sense.
Yeah.
Right. So it can come off abrasive. I try not to be if I can, but sometimes it can.
Well, Craig had a really good analogy of Hannah's husband who was really not being sensitive. So check out the message because husbands sometimes need to hear that when we're struggling, sometimes we don't need to hear the facts.
Hear the facts.
Right.
It's more just, And I've worked on that because, years ago, I was very, very direct and pointed in that. And so, I've worked on trying to, I guess, be more in touch with or in tune with feelings are important. They have relevance. They need to be addressed.
But we shouldn't lead with them.
But shouldn't lead with them, right?
Yeah.
So,
and to be honest, sometimes I wish that I had your tendency, because sometimes you just have to cut through all those emotions. Like thinking about Jesus, right? And he felt like anxious about like what was to come with the crucifixion. And yet he said, like, let your will be done and not my will. And it's like, I need to constantly do that. But it's this wrestling. It's not just like, I forget about the feelings, logic, right thing to do, so just do it. Yeah. Sometimes I wish it was that simple.
That clear cut, yeah.
Sometimes, most times.
But again, easier said than done. Right?
Easier said than done.
Yeah, I think that kind of sums up, I think, exactly what my thoughts are on kind of both sections there of just things can be much easier said than what we can actually accomplish or do, because it can be difficult. It can be really hard. Yep. So with that, how easy or difficult is it for you to trust God? And then how does knowing his character and past faithfulness help you to trust him more?
That's such a good question. I was really moved by today's message because I have felt like the last 4 years I've just been really beaten up in almost every way, whether it was the loss of a parent, whether it was the caregiving of a parent, whether it was a transition of kids taking those next steps, marriage, and then moving out for school, work, right? Working really hard, pivoting during COVID, and then work changing really dramatically, not feeling necessarily in my control. And then starting out in private practice, like I could just so relate, like my life isn't where I thought it'd be, and it's feeling much harder than I ever thought it would be in my 50s. And what I loved about today's message is that through this season, God has really been giving me this song. I wake up some mornings just singing, he won't fail. He won't. He is faithful. Yep. And going back and remember when God showed up here. Remember when God showed up there. Remember how this relationship was restored, or remember how God in that moment was with you. And so I'm so thankful for those moments. And I think sometimes where I get into is I just need a break, and God saying, and I appreciate what Craig said, sometimes in those hard moments is where you feel God the most. And opposed to bracing myself, I can lean into God more. And so that was a really good challenge. But I think this season has been really hard for me to trust. And, that was one of my words for the year. Faithful was one of my words for the year. And just figuring that out, that God he is faithful and he has accomplished something. And it's not, life shouldn't look like the way the world says it should look like. And that's what he's been really speaking to me about. Arriving in this life isn't having no stress. Arriving in this life is having a better character. And honestly, I think over the last little year and a half, I've wanted less character because I don't want the stress.
Yep.
So it's been hard.
Yeah. It is can be really hard. And I know, I think it was 2 weeks ago, we were talking actually here about in the lowest moments, or the moments of difficulty, tends to be where we find God the most. And I think that makes it easy because that's what we have. That's all that's around us that we really can trust and know is going to pull us through, is going to help us to get over or out of this difficult point. I think it's really difficult to trust God when things are going really, really well. When your life is going well, low stress, low things, I think it's easy to not trust God or not need to trust God as much because you're like, oh, things are great. I don't need to rely on him much because things are so good. Everything's just moving forward. And I think we lose some of that relationship with God because we just stop trusting over continuing to trust him as much as we did in those low moments.
Yeah, that's really interesting because when I think about like those seasons of like hardship when we're in the valleys, I think of like how desperate we get. Yep. Where it's just like, I can't rely on myself. I can't rely on other people. And so if anything, I need some higher power to step in. And so like, I would say for me, I struggle with my trust more in those harder seasons. Whereas like in the mountaintops, yes, I can forget that like, okay, this still needs to be a pursuing of God like every single day. And like, those are more so like seasons of praising and glorifying. But my trust, I feel like it's easier to trust him because I see the results maybe that like I would like to see. And so like right now, this season has been a lot of like opportunities and open doors. And like, I'm like, God, you're really doing a whole lot of work in my life and my husband's life. And it's like amazing just to see us like on fire for what like God has for us. Okay. And so like, I feel like the trust piece and the intimacy with God is more. But then like, in like a different way. It's not like a desperate.
Yeah.
But more like just like the praise and like, you're here, I see you working. And then when it's like the harder seasons, it's just like, oh my gosh, like I can't do this anymore. Like, God, like step in, provide.
So would you say in those desperate moments, is it where did you go? Is that kind of where that leads to?
That's definitely, yeah.
Because you see him in those trusting moments when things are going well. Oh God, look at the provision, look at all the opportunities, look at this. And then those desperate moments, it's like, did you leave me? Is that kind of the ideas? Okay.
That's exactly it. Yeah.
Which was the cry of David's heart, right? In the Bible, in the Psalms, right? Like when life was hard and he was being pursued and it was just one thing after another. I love that about the Psalms where David just cries out like, Lord, like why? So I love that God can hold both of those. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And definitely seeing God's, faithfulness through, again, all the provisions and everything that's, happened, especially with today's message, like can't have a kid and then has a kid.
Yeah.
Right. And then just gives that kid back to God and says, hey, here you go. And then you see, again, further down the line, what he does, where he goes, and the impact he made later on down the line, right? And I'm sure she didn't, again, she trusted God and knew that God would do something great, but had no idea where that was going to lead, right?
Yeah.
But just having that trust and knowing that God is faithful, God is just, God is kind, God is loving, that he's going to do something special.
Well, I appreciate that Craig talked about the timeline, because it's so easy to read the Bible or watch a movie or read some other book, and it's just like you're sitting down and you're seeing this whole thing unfold within like an hour or within a few like lines of the Bible, and you're like, oh my gosh, so she was in agony and she prayed and then she had the son, and it's like, whoa, we don't know how much time was really in between. That could have been years until that prayer was answered. And so same with our lives, like you were talking about remembrance, and I think about like the importance of writing down prayers, or even just those seasons where we're struggling, or like even just on the mountaintop and making note, and then being able to look back and say like, God was there, or he provided, or he answered. And so like, actually my husband and I, we have this God moments log that we started when we got married. And so last year when we were on our first anniversary, we went back and looked at that spreadsheet of like God moments we had put in. And it was so encouraging to see how much God did within that year. And of course, praying for many, many more years of all of that. But just, the importance of remembering, because we forget.
We certainly do. We certainly do. And that's all part of the journey, the story that we each have. And continuing to talk about those, again, on a regular basis. And of course, that's a great way to do that is in life groups. Right? Community, life groups, what we do each and every week. And, it's a great way to continue with that. And so I encourage you guys, start a life group, join a life group, find us, a few people, friends, close people you can trust and talk with, and you can start a life group and dive really deep into these questions. And you can certainly get a lot more out of the message each week as you go through these questions. I know we find that for sure with our life groups, that we can really learn more about what God has for us and what God's speaking to us through the messages and through his word. And it's a great way to gain a lot more perspective on what God has for each and every one of us. But man, time flies. We are having such a great conversation, but we are of course at the end of our time for this week. So I just want to thank you guys for joining me.
Thank you.
Had a great conversation. We want to thank you guys for tuning in, to being a part of what we do here on Talk It Over. A great thanks to our tech team, just again making this possible for you guys to view and just be a part of. And we, of course, want to remember, whoever finds God
finds life.